tell me a little bit about what's happening in your game development at Rooster Teeth currently.
Yeah, so Rooster Teeth Games, we're still a small, we're a very small team. We're getting into indie publishing. The Rooster Teeth Games team has only been around about a year or so, but we're already realizing, there is such an appetite in the Rooster Teeth community for fun new games. And so we're taking a look at games that, we really think the community is going to like and appreciate. So any game that we see that we feel like, oh, that's something that we could see on a Let's Play video, like we could see Achievement Hunter playing this game.
Right.
Those are kind of the games that we're looking for. So, like one of the games we have here, Battle Sloths, it's a 4-player versus game. The Ruby Grim Eclipse game, that's a 4-player co-op game. So we're really leaning into like multiplayer experiences, games that you could like, it's not only fun to play, it's fun for people to watch, everything like that. Games with a sense of humor.
Sense of humor and like sense of community seems to be the really big one for
absolutely.
Rooster Teeth.
Yeah.
And then I noticed too, like Rooster Teeth is really different from other developers at their show because like you guys kind of encompass really almost every part of the media industry currently. Like you Twitch, you stream, like you guys are live, you create, you develop.
We have feature-length movies.
Yeah, exactly. Like you guys like touch literally every base of the media industry. So do you find being part of the game development team is that like a challenge for you guys? Because like you don't deal with just one aspect, you do all aspects.
Yeah, I mean it's something that not only are we doing something different, but it also is kind of something new to the company. And so we have a lot of people from different departments, in live action, people at Achievement Hunter and everything like that it's very interesting to try to collaborate with other departments within Rooster Teeth on games. So as an example of this, so we're not only doing video games, we're also getting into physical games too. So we're looking at getting into, board games, card games, everything like that. We just released our first card game this year based on the Rooster Teeth show, $1 Million Butt.
Right.
Yeah, so we did this card game and it was kind of the games team that was like, we came up with some design concepts and prototyped it and started playtesting it in-house at Rooster Teeth. And then we started collaborating with everybody in the company to like make content for this game. And so something like that is like bringing, and also, bringing the community into that too. So like we have an upcoming expansion for the $1 Million Butt game. That's our community sourced pack.
Right.
So we had, I think it was some ridiculous, almost 20,000 submissions from the community on like scenarios for the card game. And so it's absolutely cool to be able to go and like work with our community on things and then also work with other teams within the, the Let's Play group and everything like that. So, we had people from like Fun House and Kind of Funny and Screw Attack all write content for the $1 Million Butt game. So, that in and of itself is like everybody's getting involved somehow with game development, be it a physical game or a video game.
Right. So, I mean, like, and it's not just like really your Rooster Teeth team. It's really like again that sense of community because like Rooster Teeth has roots in community to begin with. Everything kind of started with producing something and it being recepted well by the audience, and your community and your audience, your players, your watchers, your viewers seem to have like a really big say or at least influence in what you guys do for your game development.
Absolutely. And so on that note, we're always looking for Ruby Grim Eclipse. We did Steam Early Access. So we went through Steam Greenlight first.
Right.
And so, that game, like we announced that we were potentially working on a game concept, and I think it was one of the fastest games to get through Steam Greenlight. I don't know if it was a record or anything like that.
I greenlighted it as soon as I found out,
Yeah, so, like the community immediately responded and said, yes, we want this game. Please, Rooster Teeth, make this game. And then it kind of got real serious with us because the game actually started out being created by a fan by the name of Jordan Scott. So Jordan is still part of our game development team. He's our lead animator for the Grim Eclipse game. So it's a very interesting story, but as Jordan was working on this game and then Rooster Teeth started to get more serious about doing it, they decided, well, we're new to this whole game development thing. So, doing Steam Greenlight and then getting into early access and giving people a chance to give us feedback, tell us what they think about the game as we're developing it. It's part of the whole spirit of the community impact on Rooster Teeth, and I think it's something that, as we go forward, we want to still engage the community in a lot of ways with Grim Eclipse and with other games. I can see us doing other games on Steam Greenlight and doing early access. That way people can kind of like get involved with the process of making the game with us.
And I think that's an aspect, like a lot of developers are starting to like grasp but are still missing.
So for me personally, like I've been in game development almost 12 years now, and it was once a very scary thing to like let anyone play your game that you were working on before it was done, right? It's just not something that people would typically do. 5-10 years ago, it was kind of an insane idea to like want to do that. But now you have to, you have to give the audience, you have to give your fans what they want, and we don't always know what they want. We want them to tell us what they want, right?
And it's important feedback too, right? Yeah. Especially again, like with Rooster Teeth, since you guys are so community driven, it's almost like the final say doesn't really come from you guys. Final say almost kind of comes back from your community on whether something's like good or if maybe it needs final tweaking. I don't want to really give your audience that kind of power, but I feel like Rooster Teeth listens much more. Yeah, and we got that a lot from the early access community on like Ruby Grim Eclipse, for example. We had people that really wanted features, and we would release news posts and chime in on our forums and everything like that, and tell people like, help us prioritize things that you want to see. Like, feature development takes a lot of time. Yeah. And so if there's certain things that we felt like the community was really asking for, and there was an overwhelming sentiment about it, we had to reprioritize our development around that and be like, this is something that the community is asking for, and we need to do it. So it came up a lot, and there were major gameplay changes as a result. For it. And like the final product, are you happy with so far? Like, I wouldn't say it's final product yet, but like how it's coming along. Like, do you feel the relationship that you have between like your developers and your community is actually like working? Like, there's a good synergy between? Absolutely. So we came out of early access, and one thing that's very interesting is there's still a lot of people who want like they want us to release new content and everything like that. So the major thing that people want is like, they don't want to play with just Team Ruby. They want more characters because the Ruby universe is full of these awesome characters. Yeah, we have all kinds of awesome characters. Yeah, and there's everything almost. And since the show is anime, it's almost very like video game inspired in a lot of ways. And so there's a lot of characters you could see like they would be fun to play in a video game. Right. So that's one thing. We listen to the community a lot, and we're like, well, we want to spend time improving this game, and the way we can do that is add more playable characters. So we're going to be bringing lots of teams. So our next team that we're going to add to the game is Team Juniper. Right, I'm so excited for that. Yeah, and then after that, we actually want to leave it up to the community to be like, what characters do people want to see now? Because we have our own ideas as the development team to be like, there's definitely characters that we think would be really fun in the game. But at the end of the day, if there's an overwhelming opinion about a team that people want to see, that's what we want to give them. Right, especially with such a really large cast and such interesting characters, and there's clearly some more favorite characters than others, and then others just are a little more intriguing to play. That isn't to say I really love all the characters that are in Ruby, so whoever you decide to bring out, it would be great. So at that point, since you were getting so much feedback from the community in regards to Ruby, this is going to be like a really ongoing project because you're going to be adding more characters, you're listening to the community. Besides characters, what other kind of feedback are you getting on the game that you guys are looking to implement? Well, it's funny because it's a story-based game, so we want to do some non-narrative based gameplay, and that's kind of a lot of the feedback we got. Is like, of course, the replayability of going through a story mode, you only want to do that so many times. So we've been leaning into more like replayable modes. So we have something coming out called Horde mode, which is more of like, survival. You really have to work with your teammates to get through the mode, and it's very difficult. And so it's something we're showing off here for the first time on the PAX floor. I did see that. So everyone's got like different huntresses that they're playing on Ruby, and then it tells you when a huntress falls. Yeah. So we had people, one of the major things that we heard, we were like, we just want to see like enemies covering the screen. We just want to see like hordes of bad guys. Like it is in the show. Absolutely. Yeah. So like in the show, there's like this sense of doom because there's just like, oh man, there's so many Grimm.
And so that was something we didn't really do in the story mode because, we went for like harder enemies that, required like you and 4 teammates to like, take this big enemy down. But now with Horde mode, it's something that's just like, we just want to make it crazy difficult and put tons of enemies in there to kill. And it's just one of those things that, people kind of was like, it was an overwhelming opinion from people that like, give us more enemies.
Right,
Fill up the screen with bad guys.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So right now, like I find the campaign interesting, especially with your Ruby players or most likely Ruby watchers as well. Did you find a challenge actually creating a campaign? Because you already know your watchers know the story.
Yeah.
So did you do standalone, or are you just kind of following what's in the show?
So we decided we wanted to have an original bad guy and release, like, essentially contribute something back to Ruby lore and, create an all new, so the story is canon. It does actually take place, within the timeline of the show. It takes place between volume 2 and 3. So there's we're kind of wondering, like, well, what happens between those two, like, could there be some kind of adventure that the Team Ruby goes on that isn't covered in the show? And so we kind of touched on, making an original story and approached the Ruby writers. We talked with, Carrie and Miles, who are the head writers of the Ruby show, and we pitched them a bunch of ideas of things we could do for the story. And, they really like this idea of having a new bad guy because, it's a period of time within the show that, like, Torchwick is kind of, he's not gone, but he's not defeated, but not quite, he's not quite gone yet. And so there's like, we were kind of thinking like, it'd be really, really fun to introduce a new bad guy. And so we had this idea of like, everything in the Ruby universe is all, a lot of the characters are named after colors. And I don't know how it happened, but somebody had this idea of creating this bad guy named Dr. Merlot as like an evil mad scientist. And so we were like, yeah, Merlot, like he sounds like smart, evil, sophisticated. And so we had this idea, and we kind of wanted to do something like, there's also a lot of influences in like story and like fairy tales and everything like that in the Ruby show.
Especially in Team Ruby.
Right. So, once you start to read a little into some of the characterizations, there's a lot of like fairy tale type story. Like Ruby, for example, Grimm. Ruby is essentially kind of a little like, Little Red Riding Hood. And we kind of had this like Wizard of Oz style like bad guy story that we wanted to tell where, there's somebody behind the scenes making all these bad things happen, yet you don't really, they seem like so far away and they're so far removed from anything that you can do about it. So, we kind of had like, they're going into finding who's, what kind of evil mad scientist is mutating Grimm throughout the world. And they end up discovering this guy named Dr. Merlot. They enter his secret lab and everything like that. So it was kind of one of those things that, as we started to develop this character, Dr. Merlot, we're like, this guy's like a really kind of like legit bad guy that a lot of people would like to see in the show too.
Yes.
So funny thing was, we actually planned on, like, when we first started developing the character and talking with the Carrie and Miles, they were like, we weren't sure how, Dr. Merlot was going to play into the universe. And it was kind of like easy answer, like, well, can you guys just kill him off? Let's just like tie the story in a nice little bow, kill him off. That way we don't have to, really go into too much detail and cover him in the show. But everyone liked him so much that we're like, we decided to, the game has a mysterious ending and you don't really know what happens to Dr. Merlot. It leaves the door open to some interesting things we might do in the future, with the show and with possibly another Ruby game. Who knows? Right.
I mean, like, that also shows the advantage of like having different facets of Rooster Teeth between game development and then obviously your Ruby content creators too, because it's like you're able to pull from each other and kind of keep things consistent, but also at the same time, like, it opens opportunities for you guys to create things that possibly you weren't thinking of at some point on both platforms, in the show, in the game.
Right.
So like in the 4th season, are we seeing Easter eggs, Dr. Merlot? Are we?
I can't say anything to that tune. I really don't know at this point.
But it's great because like both teams are like talking to each other, and it's what's really nice and what I really appreciate about Rooster Teeth in general, because you guys cover so many platforms, is that your teams are obviously talking to each other. Everything's so seamlessly intertwined where you're just like, yeah, you guys are building a lore, you're building world, and it's together, like it's an actual, everything's influencing something, and it isn't a dead end, and that's where it stops, you know?
Yeah.
And I think definitely like your fans, your watchers, your gamers, your players all really appreciate that, because it's always fun to like play something or watch something and just see it influence on another platform.
Absolutely.
Which is really great. So with that being said in mind about Ruby, what was some of the biggest obstacles that you had in regards to developing that game?
Yeah, I mean, you know, part of it was like getting the look and art style down. You know, obviously the show is very stylized, and it's doing something. It's obviously very anime style, but it's also in 3D. You know, so everything's in 3D, and so that's kind of like an interesting art style to try to nail down. And in the game, we decided to kind of go with like a more, I guess, more kind of like video game style, you know, level design, where a lot of it's not very anime, you know, but if you look at the background art of the show, and everything is very painterly and everything like that. So we wanted everything to kind of look like this could be a matte painting almost, like, but done in 3D.
Right.
But the characters and enemies and everything had to retain that kind of like toon shaded style to them. So it was very interesting, and it was very challenging to try to like mimic the art style of the show and get all the, you know, the shading and everything down so that it looked like it could be hand drawn, but it's also 3D. So.
Right, and then necessarily what works for the show doesn't necessarily always work for like games as well.
Right. Well, and we found we tried to do a lot of things where we went out of the box of like the art style of the show, or even like the audio assets from the show. Because when we first started developing the game, we pulled assets directly from the show. Like, so literally, like the same character models that were used in like Volume 1 and 2 of Ruby, you could play with in the game. And it was both good and bad. Number one, it looked one-to-one, it looked the same. But, you know, something that was interesting is like, well, you make assets for an animated show, those aren't game optimized assets.
Right.
So we had a lot of performance issues and things like that. And so we had to try to, you know, scale back the detail of the models and optimize them so that they were, you know, performed really well
playable.
In the game. Totally playable. But at the same time, you know, we had to make it look people started to notice like little, you know, discrepancies or things that look different from the show as compared to the game. And there were details that were like small details that wasn't intentionally overlooked, but it was just like, oh yeah, you're right, you know, like there's some detail on the end of Ruby's skirt that's a little bit different, you know?
Right.
So, and it was amazing how the fans and everything picked up on every little detail of things that were different or missing. And I mean, it helped us at the end of the day make things more accurate and make sure that we were, you know, directly having everything that it had to look like the show at the very end. We also had things like audio assets. We used a lot of audio that was from the show, music from the show, sound effects, things like that. Some things, you know, were like early development of the Ruby show, like it wasn't the greatest audio effects.
Right.
You know, we had things like very generic sounding gunshots and things like that. For purposes of the game, we were like, well, we'll use whatever. If we can find better audio effects, like we had an audio engineer working with us on the development of the game, and we were like, hey, if we can improve some sound effects, it was actually like on our to-do list, like improve this sound, the one from the show doesn't sound that great, you know, we want a really cool sound here. And people actually like got really, really up in arms when we started changing sound effects, because they really expected to hear certain trademark sound effects from the show. And so we were, okay, you guys are right, we shouldn't be changing these assets.
That's fine.
Yeah, we're fine with that. So we went back and, you know, pulled in more as much audio from the show as we could find, because we knew people, that's what they wanted. So
that's great. So like your relationship with the community actually almost kind of keeps you guys in check to a degree.
yeah, it keeps us, you know, Ruby fans definitely feel, you know, a good degree of ownership. They love the show, they're huge fans, and you know, they definitely feel like it's part of them. And so we have to realize that as creators, how involved the community is with things. and, give them a say.
Yeah. So, like, there's always challenges when you're creating a game, but, like, on a more positive note, what's got to be one of the funnest things that you've done with Ruby?
Oh, man.
All of it.
All of it. I got to say, working with the cast and crew of the show, like, there's a lot of really, really talented people that just even do, like, the voice acting for the show. For me, it was really fulfilling. I wrote a lot of the dialogue for the game, and that took a lot of watching the show and working with some of the voice actors too. Like, I wrote a lot of dialogue, and then we started recording sessions, and we just started riffing off things that, like Barbara, who plays Yang, for example, like, she knows that character so well.
Right, she's like, I wouldn't say that.
Yeah, she's like, exactly. So we were recording VO, like, and a lot of it was kind of cheesy video game lines, like, maybe they wouldn't really say this, but in the context of a video game, totally, like a video game character would say that. But yeah, they had the final say as, like, as the actors, as those characters. They're like, absolutely not. Yang wouldn't say that. She would say this. And so that was like one of the really fun parts for me, was like working with the actors to like make those characters come to life in the game. Which is odd too, because as a viewer and as a watcher, you would almost feel like, since you work in Rooster Teeth, that would almost be really easy. But also, I don't know, I'm not trying to downplay you on that. You'd almost feel like it'd be easy, but like the truth is you're creating a completely different part of the universe, really essentially from scratch. And like, it's not like you can take the animators from Ruby and take them off from like doing their season's work. Yeah,
so like you've got to kind of like fill in the gaps and to a degree keep your own self in there, but also kind of like steal some essence from everywhere else to make sure that you hit all the right points for the game.
Yeah, and so there was a lot of collaboration with the Ruby team to like you said, our animation team at Rooster Teeth. I mean, there are some very busy folks, and there's a lot of animation. New series, Ruby Volume 4. There's all these things in production right now, so it's always like, hey, we're working on the game too. We need some feedback. We want to work with the the art director, Patrick. Work with Carrie and Miles, because we want to make sure that we're doing things that they want to see in the game as well. Not only being fans of Ruby and creators of Ruby, but they want the game to be awesome too. So like, at the end of the day, everybody wants everything to feel like, that whole Ruby fantasy fulfillment of being able to like play as Team Ruby and really like making that feel as good in the game as it would be in the show. So yeah, there was absolutely a ton of collaboration and working together, and finding the time to do that was not all. It was a very, very big challenge at times. Right,
working around everyone else's schedule and their deadlines and your deadlines and all that. So I can imagine it's really hectic.
And another thing is like, a lot of the voice actors are Rooster Teeth employees. Ryan from Achievement Hunter plays Professor Port. Joel Heineman plays Dr. Oobleck. We have a lot of just employees with making their own shows, working on their own projects, but they're also voice actors, and so scheduling around finding like time to schedule voice acting recordings and everything like that was very challenging sometimes.
That almost sounds like that was probably the biggest challenge on this project than really most anything else. Was just kind of like scheduling around
actors,
everybody.
Exactly. And there were a lot of times that we ended up like almost just almost missing a deadline, where we're like, so-and-so is out of town working on this one thing, and like we're trying to get them, maybe we could do a remote session and have them record VO from like LA or something like that. So it was very challenging. Like,
just record it and send it, it's fine.
Some things like came in right at the last minute. It was very challenging.
So now that we're looking at new teams being added, you're adding a horde mode. Was there anything else that you were adding into Ruby, or are you kind of still just looking at the community to give you feedback on that extra feature?
Like we said, with horde mode, we're going to release it with several maps, but if people really like that mode and it's something that people want more of, we'll continue to make more maps for it. And teams, like I said, we don't want to stop with just Team Ruby and Team Juniper. There's more characters we want to see in the game. There's more characters fans want to see in the game. So we're going to continue developing that. And then also, more platforms too. So,
definitely.
Like this game was really born out of Steam Greenlight and early access. now that we've released the PC version on Steam, we're bringing it to Mac, we're bringing it to PlayStation 4, we're bringing it to Xbox One, because we know that there's so many fans out there that, we need to get it on as many platforms as possible and give people a chance to play it.
Everyone's got different ways of gaming, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So tell me, we went over what was the hardest, what was the funnest on there. Mm-hmm. Was there anything on Ruby where you were just like, I don't look forward to doing this at all?
No.
No.
I can't say that there was anything that we ever dreaded doing or anything like that. It's just one of those things that I guess probably the thing that was always hard and a little bit disappointing is like when the community suggested features that we didn't really have time to develop, or we didn't want to ever deliver bad news to our community,
right?
Or ever say no to ideas that people were suggesting. And so that was kind of some of the things, like breaking bad news to the community, saying, oh, something's delayed, or we're actually not going to do this thing. We try to be very transparent with our community, and sometimes that also means delivering bad news about things, or saying something might be delayed, or saying this might not be everything you hope and dream, but it's still going to be fun. So a lot of that was kind of the hardest thing. Managing the community, managing expectations.
Right.
That was always something that sometimes we dreaded having those conversations, but it's at the same time, it's part of the transparency that we strive for.
And I think everyone really appreciates that too, because I think you run the risk when you do get a pull a lot from the community. Yeah. Also at the same time, the community can get a little out of hand and have really, really high expectations, and you're like, guys, I need you to tone it down just a little.
Well, and I don't want to
I'm not going to put you in that corner.
For people who don't make games, game development's not easy, and it's one of those things that everybody wants to get into game development. Everybody thinks they have some really cool ideas for games, and when it comes down to it, game development, it's a very time-consuming, difficult, trying process sometimes. And there's always some times where also you try and something doesn't work, and you have to go to plan B, and everything like that. So. Sometimes people suggested a lot of things, and it wasn't feasible. It wasn't in scope, but we didn't have time to do it. And a lot of those things is just part of being a small development team. But also, people expect very big things out of Rooster Teeth. And I don't think they always realize how few people work on things sometimes.
Passion.
And it is
only
a passion.
Fuels so much.
Yeah, right. So you can be very passionate about something, but at the end of the day, we need to sleep too. We're real people. We have pets to feed at home. We have responsibilities outside of work sometimes, and as dedicated and as passionate as we can be, there's sometimes only so much we can do.
Yeah.
And so some of that leads to a little bit of, crazy high AAA video game expectations, and then at the end of the day, you have indie game resources to pull that off.
Right.
And, that's the situation we often found ourselves in. Yeah.
But also at the same, on a more positive note, I think the community also, after they kind of get off of that high, realizes it well, and everyone really appreciates it too.
Oh, yeah. Well, and also when they realize that we're responding, we're listening.
Yeah.
We're having a conversation about things. Then some of that kind of like, okay, we're still all in a good relationship, with our fans. It's
That's
not
great.
always. It's hard to say no to things, though.
Right. So on a more positive note for Ruby, what was definitely one of the more fun aspects in working in the game?
I would say absolutely. Just bringing the characters to life and making their combat. Doing combat design was one of the most fun things.
Especially when everyone is so distinctive in their combat.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, watching the show, there's such excellent fight choreography, and a lot of it's even motion captured and everything like that. So obviously it lent itself to fun game mechanics. And designing combat and saying play testing it and being that's fun, and then always coming up with more things to we could really take this move over the top, things like that. That was some really fun conversations we had within our dev team to be how can we make these moves even more ridiculous and fantastic and over the top.
Did you find yourself pulling from the show like which moves you want to incorporate into
Absolutely.
it?
We would go and kind of like watch clips, and there were very like signature moves that some characters had that we were like, absolutely, we need to incorporate this somehow. So
right. And then did you find also like during your development for that combat that you were kind of filling in those gaps that you don't see in the show to like make it look fluid, like actual combos and fluidity of it?
And the fluidity of it, and then also kind of like the character-based semblance and abilities. So like all the hunters and huntresses within the Ruby universe, they have a lot of them have this special semblance, which kind of you can think of it as like a magical power essentially. But in the show, sometimes things are only scratch the surface as far as a character's semblance. And in gameplay, we can really do a lot of fun things.
It's a big thing. Like, you actually pull from it a lot more because, like, you're, as the player, you're utilizing semblance versus being a watcher. You kind of just learn about it.
So there might be a scene with a character where in the show you see one time. There's one scene so far that shows off a character's semblance, and it allows us to like really do things with the game that like, oh, now you can really have fun with playing with this. Like Team Juniper, for example. Some of those characters didn't get a whole lot of screen time, but people love them. They're really big fan favorites. But when you look at like their combat scenes in the show, like Nora, for example, I think she has one scene where she like pulls electricity from the sky into her hammer and then like slams it down.
She goes all Thor status on that.
Exactly. She goes totally like Thor's hammer, and we're like, well, I want to play that. I want that to be in the game. Yeah. And so we totally play. Her character design is totally inspired by her semblance, which is really only in one scene from the show.
Right.
And so it allows us to like really take those cool moments from the show and do a lot more of them.
So you kind of like really fill in the gaps that viewers don't see, but they can like really input and play in themselves, and like everything that they've imagined that the character can do, you really put on the screen for them.
Absolutely.
And I'm actually really hoping that the animators for Ruby see that in your game and really start pulling. It'd be vice versa now that they're pulling from your game and just inputting into the animation.
That would make us feel awesome if our game could go and like influence back the Ruby animation team. That would make us really happy.
I hope it does, because like a lot of the things that you have in the game just make so much sense for how it works in the universe. So I really hope to see them within the new season and everything else. So I know we talked about Ruby a whole lot. Is there anything else developing or happening at Rooster Teeth that we should be aware of?
So, I mentioned the $1 Million Butt card game.
Yep.
That's been a really fun thing, and we did a Kickstarter with that, which was tremendously, like, blew us away and how successful it was. And, we're doing a lot more with that game. So since we left the Kickstarter, we have it available for sale on the Rooster Teeth store, in which we're always like almost on the verge of selling out of copies of the $1 Million Butt card game.
That's a good problem to have,
We actually, like here at PAX, we brought a bunch of copies with us. We sold out. And so, like, that's one thing that, fans have been having a really fun time with that game. And who knows, like, we want to continue making more expansions for it. We've considered even doing a digital version of the game too.
Nice.
So it's something, you could play online with friends. We're also, we're showing off other games here that we're going to be doing some publishing. So we're getting into indie game publishing. We're really looking at games that we see people, we see developers out here. A lot of them, here in Austin, or there in Austin where we're based out of. Austin's a real hotbed for, game development, especially indie game devs. And, there's people that are kind of, like loosely associated with Rooster Teeth that are working on games that, we want to make those things come to life and help them out, help them promote their projects. And
Rooster Teeth's been there, so you guys know that struggle.
Totally.
Yeah, that makes so much sense to be in development.
Yeah, so, like I said, I think it's only been around about a year, Rooster Teeth games, so we're going to continue working on Ruby. We're going to be working on another new original game soon. So we don't have any real news on that. Just know that it's happening, that we're working on another original game, and then we're also, here at PAX, like talking with indie game developers about publishing. And then, coming by the end of this year, we're going to be releasing Battle Sloths and Super Rad Ray Gun. Battle Sloths, from the moment, it was actually a funny story because the creator of Battle Sloths is another local Austin developer, And we were at just there's all these game dev meetups in Austin, and a lot of us from the Rooster Teeth Games team, we love to go to these meetups and talk with people, tell people what we're doing at Rooster Teeth, and we saw Battle Sloss at a local game meetup, and from the moment we played it, we were like, this game is hilarious. We could see Rooster Teeth fans.
It's called Battle Sloss. How much more funny is it going to get?
Absolutely. So we're like, this is something our Rooster Teeth fans need. They need this game. And so we really got behind it, and working directly with the creator of the game, to make it as big as we possibly can make it. So
perfect. So thank you so much for the interview.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. Everyone's going to look forward to Ruby. I'm always looking forward to it.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah. And as a viewer, as a watcher, as a gamer, thank you for taking your community into everything that you do. That's what we love about you guys. Thank you again for the time and the interview.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.